Hola a todos, bienvenidos al canal de la Red Cultural. Estamos aquí con un gran amigo que nos acompaña nuevamente aquí en Chile. Tenemos el privilegio de tener al profesor de literatura, Joseph Pearce. Hi Joseph, welcome to Red Cultural channel. It's a pleasure to have you again in Chile.
Well, it's marvelous to be back. I love Santiago, I love Chile. I've been here several times, mostly thanks to you, Magdalena, and it's good to be back, partly because I love Chile and partly because I love you.
Oh, thank you, thank you. I'm very glad that you are here. So this 2018 is a great year of literary celebrations, and shall we start with one that you remind me that this is the centenary of Solzhenitsyn, and you were so lucky, so lucky, being able to interview him, and you are one of his biographers.
Yes, one of the great privileges and joys of my life back in 1998 was to travel to Moscow to interview Alexander Solzhenitsyn. So as you rightly say, this is the centenary of Alexander Solzhenitsyn's birth. He was born in 1918, so 1 year after the Russian Revolution. He was born into communism, and I interviewed him in 1998, so when he was in his 80th year, and of course now in his centenary year. And it really was a great joy for me to actually get to go to Moscow to interview him, because he was a hero of mine when I was growing up, an icon, if you like, someone who was larger than life. And it was really good to be able to see him in the flesh, to meet him as a person, and to see that he was much more than merely the icon. In other words, the icon is of this sort of stern Jeremiah type prophet figure, who lacks a sense of humour, etc., who's full of
like a sculptor.
Yes, he's full of prophecies of doom. Okay.
Yeah.
But when you actually meet him, what I was struck by was his sense of humour. He had a great sense of humour. He was always chuckling, had this infectious laugh.
Oh yeah.
And a great sense of humour. His eyes were mischievous. His family, one of his sons told me that he has the family literally rolling on the floor in hysterics with his ability to mimic politicians and other famous people.
Wow.
So what I try to bring out in my biography, obviously the centrality of Solzhenitsyn's Christian faith, that was one thing I did have as a goal with Solzhenitsyn's blessing, but also his humanity, and especially his humanity in the sense of his sense of humour, which is so often lost otherwise.
Yeah, incredible. And one of the things that probably might be very incredible to have this sort of a giant of the 20th century, and what was the things that impressed you more of the interview, the possibility, and also to research about his life and be able to be his biographer?
Well, the point is, as I said, in one sense, subjectively, as a teenager, when I first read the Gulag Archipelago, Solzhenitsyn has become a hero of mine. But objectively, in other words, regardless of what I think of him, you know, he is an absolute giant of the 20th century, in the sense that if you think about who is responsible for bringing down the tyranny of Soviet communism, which was responsible for the deaths of tens of millions of people, who is responsible for bringing that down? You might think perhaps of the alliance between Ronald Reagan and Margaret Thatcher, and that political alliance against communism. You would certainly need to think about St. John Paul II,
exactly.
his role against communism. Be not afraid, as he would say. But you also could not leave out Alexander Solzhenitsyn. I mean, if you just had to name those four people. And Alexander Solzhenitsyn single-handedly almost exposed the horrors of Soviet communism from the inside, because he was imprisoned for the hideous crime of criticising Joseph Stalin in a private correspondence to a friend, not even in public, but for that private letter he was sentenced to prison and hard labour. But from inside that prison system, he exposed the horrors of Soviet communism by writing the Gulag Archipelago, a three-part history.
Yeah, and also the story of the manuscript is something amazing.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, he had to keep this hidden from the KGB. People were murdered. KGB trying to find out where his manuscripts were, and so his works of literature basically brought to light, it's like lifting a stone and seeing all the cockroaches underneath the stone. He lifted the stone from Soviet communism to show the real cesspit that it was. And for that, he deserves, all of us of freedom throughout the world, should lionize Solzhenitsyn as one of the great heroes of the 20th century.
Well, this year also we are celebrating, commemorating, remember, think about the end of the Great War. And you were working about the poets of the war, and actually you did a play.
I did, which is actually not the sort of thing I usually do. I write non-fiction and biographies, and not normally go off on these literary flights of fancy. But I wrote a play called Death Comes for the War Poets, and it's just a three character play. We have Wilfred Owen and Siegfried Sassoon, the two war poets, and then the third character is a female character called Death, the spirit of death itself. And I expected the play to be crucified when it had a 3-week run off Broadway in New York City, and I expected to be crucified by the secular critics there, a very liberal sort of world, because it doesn't shy away from the fact that Siegfried Sassoon was a convert to Catholicism, and there's a point at which he falls to his knees with a rosary in his hand and prays. And I thought this would mean that it would just be crucified. But in actual fact, to my great surprise and great joy, it was universally received good reviews from the secular media there. So our plan for 2018, for the centenary of the ending of World War I, is to actually make this into a film. So if all goes well, in November this year, which will be exactly the centenary of the ending of the war, we'll be filming Death Comes for the War Poets.
That's fantastic. So next year to the Oscars.
Well, that's a joyful thought.
Well, if you were there and you are invited to the red carpet, you have to invite me.
Oh, it's a deal. It's a deal.
That was my only chance to be there.
The Oscars and mine.
That's good. I like it. Also this year, we are celebrating, commemorating the born of a literary figure that probably is bigger than her author, that it's Frankenstein.
Yes.
So Frankenstein is bigger because it's a big monster indeed, but it's bigger in another sense than even Mary Shelley. And he comes even to the 21st century alive, even though he's an undead. But sometimes even she was forget about her, but he's alive. Why?
Yeah, this is an astonishing work. They say it's 200th anniversary of the publication of Frankenstein.
Yes.
And it's a work that, as you say, one of the astonishing things about it, it's bigger than the author. I mean, if you were to do a poll, who's heard of Frankenstein and who's heard of Mary Shelley, I mean, we all know that more people have heard of Frankenstein than Mary Shelley.
Exception for that, the Hollywood says Mary Shelley, Frankenstein. They try to touch.
Well, the more recent version.
Yeah.
Yes, that's true, which is probably just which is fair enough, as she wrote the novel. But I think that most people say that the power of Frankenstein, she unleashed a force, if you like, in the writing of that novel, which was more mythological than merely fiction. In other words, that there's truths about the idolization of technology, the pride behind scientism, and what technology can unleash in the Victor Frankenstein's invention or creation of the monster, that I think touch upon all sorts of contemporary aspects of society. So it sort of works on the level of pagan myth. I mean, we see Frankenstein the way we might see Achilles or Zeus, or Prometheus, and the actual.
Actually, he named it the modern Prometheus.
Exactly. The subtitle is the modern Prometheus because it is a retelling in some sense of that powerful pagan myth. So what she's unleashed is a monster, if you like, more powerful than any work of fiction, bigger than she was. That's the power of art in many ways, and something which gives us a warning, gives us lessons about the limits of what we can and should do with our human cleverness, because as our favourite writer between us, at least one of our favourite writers is J.R.R. Tolkien. He makes a great distinction between cleverness and wisdom. We're very clever, but being clever is not necessarily being wise. And unless we harness our cleverness to wisdom, it can go to all sorts of dangerous directions. I think
Yeah,
Frankenstein.
cleverness could be evil.
Yeah, well, cleverness could destroy the world, right? We have nuclear bombs now that are capable of destroying life on the planet. I mean, at some point, our cleverness becomes deadly.
Exactly. And do you think that Mary Shelley, even though she was a teenager, and this is something that is remarkable indeed, realized the power of the myth in order to rename the old myths? If you think about Prometheus, so she renamed the Frankenstein, the modern Prometheus, because she knew that in those ancient myths there's a truth that it's necessary to remind to this modern changing industrializing world, because it's 1818, so it's just starting the industrial revolution.
Yes, the industrial revolution was just beginning. Percy Shelley, Mary's not her husband when she first wrote the novel. She eloped with him. Was fascinated by science, fascinated by the new technology of electricity, for instance, and Galvanism, where it seems you can bring a body back to life by putting so you get a corpse and you pass electric current through it and it starts moving like a marionette. And they thought this maybe electricity, you can bring people back to life with the power of electricity. So new technology as it was seen then. But some of the horrors of the story, though, on some level, of course, it's a horror story, not just a science fiction story or retelling of a myth. I think it's played out by what's happening in Mary Shelley's life. I mean, she's a teenager. It's remarkable that a teenager could write something this powerful. But while she's writing it, in the midst of the 10 months that she's writing it, the woman, Percy Shelley's wife, who Percy Shelley deserted in order to elope with Mary, commits suicide. Mary loses a child. Mary's half-sister, Fanny Imlay, also commits suicide. So you have all of this, if you like, culture of death going on in the background, some of which Mary must have felt partially responsible for. Certainly,
at least for the wife.
For the wife, for the wife who's deserted for her. So one wonders whether, that this monster that's unleashed is the monster of passion as well. The monstrous passion of just allowing us to follow our passions to the exclusion of reason, and where that leads, to destruction where that leads. I think in that you see romanticism unleashed, and it's not necessarily very pretty.
Talking about romanticism unleashed, this is also the year of the 200 years of the born of Emily Bronte. And Emily Bronte, undoubtedly, it's one of the one that create a novel with all the passion unleashed, which one probably makes at the end kill herself at the end, because she write the novel and after a while she passed away. And Wuthering Heights is one of the most, I don't know how, for me, one of the best book ever written, thinking about novels, but it's great because of the too human in it, in a way that it's even not rational.
Well, no, it isn't rational. I think that's the lesson perhaps that Emily Bronte is trying to teach in the novel, is if you allow, again, it dovetails very nicely with the unleashing of the monster in Frankenstein, that if you allow your passions to override your reason, you end up in all sorts of bad places. So we see in the characterization of Heathcliff and Cathy this following passion to the exclusion of reason, following desire, following envy, following all these things that are emotional to the exclusion of reason. And the consequences of that is, of course, destructive and disastrous. And I think one of the mistakes that's made about reading Wuthering Heights is we read it purely as a work of darkness. A work that Heathcliff, if you like, is the Byronic hero. But there's nothing but darkness, nothing but passion, and there's something even noble perhaps in their ultimately self-destructive, mutually self-destructive so-called love. But we need to remember that Emily Bronte was raised in a Christian family. Her father was an Anglican parson.
Yeah.
She was a Christian. We know this from her poetry, a believing Christian. And we also see it in the novel, because the character who epitomizes reason in the novel is the nurse. What's her name? Nellie. So you see her as the voice of wisdom, the voice of reason, the voice of Christianity in the novel. And of course, she's ignored by Catherine. She's ignored by Heathcliff. And you have this destruction in consequence. But the twist in the novel, if you like, the turn, what Tolkien would call the eucatastrophe in the novel, this sudden joyous turn in the novel, is after Heathcliff dies. It's as if the demon has been exorcised.
Yes.
And there is a wonderful part of the novel where there's a reference to words written above the lintel, the door, to Wuthering Heights. And of course the most famous, we're not told what the words actually say, but the most famous lines written above the door in the whole literature, of course, are the lines inscribed above the door of Dante's Inferno, right? Abandon all hope, all ye who enter here, right? So that you can imagine that really what Emily Bronte is doing, a literary joke, a literary allusion, an analogy, is Wuthering Heights is hell, right? It's the Inferno. And the reason it's the Inferno is because it's possessed by a demon. The demon is Heathcliff. So when Heathcliff dies, it's as if a weight is lifted, as if the evil spirit is exorcised, and the new generation, the next generation, the younger Cathy and Hareton, right? How do we say? First of all, they're happy, right? The sun's shining, they're laughing. There's none of this doom-laden, passionate despair.
Yeah, but also Cathy, at the beginning, thought that Hareton is the worst, but then she met him, she know him, and after knowing him, start loving him, because Aristotle, the idea of nobody loves what they don't know.
Right. And also, yes, absolutely. And Heathcliff, of course, deliberately kept Hareton ignorant as an act of anger and envy. So he made Hareton ignorant. And in the early part of the novel, one of the most heart-wrenching parts of the novel is Hareton's desire to learn to read. Yeah. And the fact that he's ridiculed for his ignorance by those who are in their arrogance, okay? He wants to learn. He's been kept ignorant. And at the end of the story, end of the novel, Cathy is teaching him to read. I mean, this is really the triumph of reason, right? Over arrogant passion that refuses to reason. We have reason being, if you like, resurrected through the act of teaching Hareton to read. And the fact that Emily Bronte has the novel end on New Year's Day, which is itself, a day of resurrection. We put the old behind us.
New cycle.
We ring in the new. So the demon's being exorcised, and the new world is happening. The resurrection is happening. So a profoundly Christian ending to what is a profoundly Christian novel, even though it's also profoundly dark.
Yeah, it is dark, but it's a continuous. If you're thinking about literature as a subject of study, anybody will try to divide literature between two forces as a sort of Nietzschean analysis of the Apollo and Dionysius. So it's the reign of Dionysius the entire, and then Apollo comes, and it's the opposite of Nietzsche.
Right.
Because
the dualism. But it's actually, that's not what's happening here. What we see is the absence of good being destructive, which is a Christian, Augustinian understanding of evil, that basically evil is just the absence of good. So once the evil is removed, we have good, right? We have good. We have the resurrection. Once those that refuse reason, right, and refuse goodness, refuse truth, refuse beauty, right, in their dark passion for each other, that dark passionate love in inverted commas, between Heathcliff and Catherine, is replaced by a real love, a true love, by the next generation.
Indeed. So next time we have to talk about Tolkien.
Oh, you bet. Anytime. My favorite subject.
Yeah, me too. Mine too. So, thank you very much to be with us in this interview, and we will try to do another one then.
Absolutely. My pleasure, Magdalena, as always. God bless you.
Thank you. Let's see. I hope.
Please God.
Yes.
Hey, we got it.
Let's see.